Good morning. Good morning. Do you guys remember Bernie Madoff? Yeah? You remember the name ring a bell? It's a few years ago, back in 2009 that he was in the news. He was an investor, a financier, he was a scoundrel. That's what it was. He was a fraudster. Right? He actually was responsible for what is considered to be the largest Ponzi scheme, the largest pyramid scheme, at least financially, in the history of the United States. Over $36 billion involved. And basically he would go around and he would convince people that he had this brilliant investing firm and that he could give really great returns, and they would give him the money, and then instead of investing it, he said he just stuck it in a bank account. And then, he would have a good time. But then whenever someone said, hey, I need some money, he would take some money from the bank account, which had all these other people's money in it. And so he kept up the illusion that they were actually making money. And then finally it came to a head, and it kind of fell apart at one point, as all pyramid schemes tend to. Now, what would you think needs to be done to Bernie Madoff? Think in your mind. What's that? Pay every penny back. Okay. Right? Thinking, what are the things down? Now, how many of you would think, commend him? Commend him, praise him for what he's done. Anyone? No? You're just swinging at a fly, right?
Yeah.
He's like, no, I think you did awesome. Right? But that's what we see a little bit in our gospel reading. It's kind of weird. You have this guy who's dealing dishonestly with people, and yet he gets commended by it. It's kind of weird, but it's part of this parable. And it's a little bit of a difficult parable. It's the parable of the unjust manager. And it's a little difficult both because it's just kind of a tough parable to understand. We read it and we're kind of like, what's going on? Usually there's a good character in the parables. You're like, okay, so that's the God character. And, this is here. And you can kind of figure these things out. There's really no really good character in this. There's no one that you're like, yeah, that's the hero. There's really not. It's not like we have the shepherd who seeks out the sheep. You have a wealthy guy who's commending people for doing bad things, and you have a manager who's doing bad things. There's kind of no upside there. So it's kind of a tough thing. The other reason this is a tough parable is because of what it deals with, which is money. It's talking about the use of money. And the honest truth is that a lot of times we hear these verses about money and we kind of want to be like, let's not deal with that one. Money's a little personal. Money's, I kind of like having a little money. And it can be hard to hear about that. In fact, I know pastors who will not preach on money. They will not preach on money because they're afraid that people are going to hear it and they're going to say, they're just going to think I'm trying to get in their pockets. They're just going to think, pastor's after our money again. And so they won't do it. They literally won't preach on money. But if you read through the scriptures, you see money is actually dealt with a lot. And for good reason. It's one of the biggest stumbling blocks that we as believers have. Money is a tough thing to deal with. So we're going to talk a little bit about money today. We'd be doing a disservice if we ignored all of those passages. So we have this parable. Okay, and in this parable, there's this wealthy man. He's got a lot of money, a lot of land, right? So he hires someone to kind of manage all that. So you have the manager, and he's kind of taking care of all these different accounts. He's probably dealing with land that's being lent out to farmers who would then owe the master a certain percentage of the crop that they bring in or things like that. However, he's not been very good at it. And it doesn't say whether he was defrauding the master or whether he was just careless with the money, but he was not doing a very good job. And so the master hears about it and he says, show me the books. I want to see what's going on here. Right? And then you're not going to work for me. So the guy knows he's getting fired. Apparently it wasn't so bad that the master felt like he had to get rid of him immediately. He has time to kind of clean up things and to settle some accounts. And so he starts trying to figure out what to do. It's like, I'm about to lose my job. How am I going to eat? How am I going to, where am I going to keep my house? What am I supposed to do? And so he's thinking to himself, well, I don't really have the physique to be able to do manual labor. I'm not strong enough for that. And I don't want to beg. So what am I supposed to do? And he comes up with a plan. It's really more of a scheme. right? And he's like, okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to call in everyone that owes the master some money, and I'm going to start lowering their debt. So he does it, right? He calls in the first guy, and he says, how much do you owe? He says, 100 measures of oil. Make it 50. Awesome, thanks, man. Right? Next guy, how much do you owe? 80 measures of wheat. Make it 80. Right? Thank you. Right? And he figures that by doing this, he's already lost the job. It's not going to get too much worse with the master, but now he'll get all these people that like him. He did them a favor. They might even owe him a little something. Right? And so when he's out of the job, he'll be able to go to them and say, hey, I need a little help here. I don't have a job. And they'll help him. Now, when the master comes in, you know the disciples are hearing this, right? Jesus is telling this to disciples. And you know that they're hearing this, and they're like, oh, now here it comes. The master found out. Oh, he's going to get it. That guy's going to jail. But what happens? The master comes in and commends him. Commends him for his shrewdness. Commends him for having come up with this idea to set himself, so that he has nothing to worry about. It's kind of like, he probably wasn't happy about losing the money, but he's like, that was kind of a pretty creative plan there. You got yourself pretty well set. So it's kind of odd, right? Because he was unjust about it, but then Jesus kind of explains it there, doesn't he? He says, the people of this generation, or those who are not believers, they deal more wisely with the world, within the context of the rules of the world, than the believers and the sons of light. They're using their money, they're using their wealth to gain the things that they think are important. And yet, those who believe, what are you using your money for? What are you using it for? He says you should be going out and using, he calls it your unrighteous wealth. He's not saying that you go out and get it unrighteously, but rather he's just referring to money versus the treasures of heaven, versus the true riches of the kingdom of God. He says you use this money, use it to make friends, use it to get all these people to know them, so that they will then welcome you into the heavenly realms. What does that mean? What does that mean? He's not saying that how you spend your money is going to get you into heaven. That if you go and use your money in the right way, then you're going to get into heaven one way or another. He's not saying that. The Bible's very clear, right? And we read this in our epistle reading, that it is only through Christ and the grace of Jesus Christ that we are saved. There is only one mediator between us and God, and that is Jesus Christ. And so we are not saved by how we use our money. We are not saved by our works. We are saved rather only by the grace of Jesus Christ and his death on the cross. But then how we use this money that we have, it does matter. And we're not saved by it, but he's saying go out and use the money so that you can bring people into the church. When he says that we need to be making friends so that they'll be there to welcome us in, right? The implication is if they're getting into heaven as well, that they are coming to faith in Christ. So use the money to get to know all these people and share that gospel so that they can believe, so that they will be there to welcome you into heaven when all this is done. That's what we do as people of the kingdom of God. Our money is not our own, much like the manager. Right? Our money, he was using the money of the master. We're using the money of the master. So use it for the things that God would want it to be used for. Unlike the unjust master, or the unjust manager who was only using it for his own gain. Use it wisely for what the kingdom of God is about. To show the love of Christ to you. And he goes on, and he says, he starts talking about if you're going to be faithful with little, you'll be faithful with much. If you're not faithful, then you won't be. And he kind of brings it all down to, look, you cannot serve both money and God. Who are you serving? Who are you serving? Is the money being brought in to serve God? Is that the purpose of it? When you get the money, are you thinking, how can I use this for God? Or are we rather praying that God will give us the money so that we can do whatever we want to do with it? Are we out there just to seek the money? Are we serving the money? And I think that it's kind of a weird question, because if we asked this and we went around the room, that most of us would say, well, yeah, I'm going to serve God. I'm not going to serve money. And I think we would honestly say that. I also think that if we were to go into a room of non-Christians and say, you're going to serve God or money, they probably wouldn't say I'm going to serve God, but they're not going to serve money either. That's not cool, right? We're the Bernie Madoffs are not praised for having figured out how to somehow get $18 billion. That's not cool. That whole 80s greed thing it's not cool, right? So I think even they would say, well, I'm not going to serve money. But I think what happens is that it's a lot more subtle. Right? It's a lot more subtle, and it just shows itself rather in the way that we use the money that we have. And so it's things like, if a missionary were to come here and say, I'm trying to raise funds to go to wherever, go to Haiti or something like that, to bring the gospel to people there who aren't being reached, like, you know what? I really don't have the money for that. I'm sorry. I'll pray for you, though. And I'm going to meet a friend of mine at Disney World tomorrow, and I'll pray for you. We'll pray for you there, too. Right? And it's just how we're using our money. Sometimes it doesn't show the values of the kingdom of God. And so it's a lot more subtle. We're not actually sitting there saying, I want to serve money. Yes, I want to get as much money as I can. No, we don't think of it that way, and yet we kind of are doing that sometimes. So it can be tricky. And he warns us that we need to either serve God, serve money. It's really not going to go both ways. So what can we do? What are some of the practical things that we can do with this? And I'm going to give you 5 things. Okay, 5 ideas I want to encourage you to think about, pray about, do, hopefully, that kind of deal with this. Okay, and the first one is to pray. Pray. And we always talk about prayer. Prayer is usually the first thing that we talk about. Sometimes, though, it can feel like a throwaway. Okay, yeah, pray. It's like the first few letters in Wheel of Fortune that they just started giving everyone because they always guess this, okay, yeah, we'll pray, whatever. No, really pray. Like, take 15, 30 minutes, shut yourself into a room somewhere away from the distractions and pray. And really seek God about this, because there are going to be things, or there may be things, I don't want to assume, but there may be things about your life that you don't really want to see. And that we need God to show us those things, because we don't really want to see them. And then if there are those things, there are going to be things that need to change, and only God is going to be the one who can change that. So we need to go to Him in prayer. And honestly and urgently seek Him in prayer. So the first thing I would recommend is to spend some real time in prayer. The second thing, track your spending. Take a month and track your spending. Write down everything that you're spending money on. Or maybe you have the records already and you can go back through, you can see last month's. But go back, figure out, what am I really spending my money on? I've done the financial piece, the workshop, or not workshop, but it's like a 13-week class. And that's one of the first things that you do, is you go through and you start tracking everything that you're spending. I'll tell you what, that is one of the most eye-opening things when you go through that class. Because you're like, oh, I know how I spend my money. I have a general idea. And then you go through and you do it, and you're like, wow. $5 a day for this, suddenly, it's like, $100 and something at the end of the month. And you're like, wow, I didn't realize I was spending that much on whatever, on coffee or on movies or, and all these things. And it can be a real eye-opener. But it will also, not only can it just be helpful in a practical sense from a budgeting standpoint, but it's helpful to show us where our priorities are, where our heart is. Right? Because where we're spending our resources shows a lot about what our priorities are. And so we're going to see, and some things are going to be, priorities can be a good thing. I want money for my house, so I'm going to prioritize that. I want to be able to feed my family. That's a good thing, right? But we're going to just kind of look and see how you're spending and how much you're spending on some of these things. Because that's the other side of it, right? You can have a very legitimate thing. I'm spending money on food. Okay, well, I'm spending $1,500 on food because I'm going to Burns. That's a totally different concept. But I would encourage you to track your money. See how you're spending your money. Then the third thing is set your perspective on money. Set your perspective on money. Decide what is money and whose is it, what does it come from? Right? The money that we have is a gift from God. It is a gift from God. He gives it to us a lot of times through the work that we do. You know, it's not always these, strange, miraculous ways that God, sometimes he does. You know, but everything that we have is a gift from God. So set that perspective, that mindset. When we did the thing with the kids today, right? I handed out money. The first thing that I did was I handed money to Kate, right? And said, hey, could you go give this to someone? And she had no hesitation about that, did she? She goes, oh, okay. Boom, took it, walked over, gave $1. Didn't think twice about it. Because this was not her money, right? It was someone else's money. They had given it to her for a purpose, and she went and did it. Now then, after I gave them all money, let them hold it for a little while, and then my own daughter, right, said, hey, could you go give this to, someone else? Nope. This is my money, right? And that perspective changed. It wasn't someone else's money that was there to do with what that person wanted. This is now my money. Now I don't want to give it up. Right? And sometimes we can be like that, but when we realize that this is God's money, that he has blessed us with, that he is taking care of us with, then it changes our perspective. Sometimes I like to think of it in that way when I get money, that, hey, this is God's money. And sometimes he says, okay, now I want you to go give it over to there. Okay. Sometimes it's, hey, you need to provide for your family. Use it for them. And honestly, I think sometimes it's, hey, guess what? Have fun. There are plenty of examples in the Bible of people who have more money than they absolutely need, and God does not condemn them. All right, but the mindset is that I'm going to use this money this is God's money, and I'm going to use it. We're managers, we're stewards of that money. The second thing is to think of money as a tool rather than the object to be had. Right? Money doesn't really do you any good if you think about it. It's sitting in your bank account. It's sitting in your wallet. It's not really useful until you use it. Right? It's not. I don't get money so that I can see money and have money. I get money because I want to keep my house. Because I want to feed my children, or because I want to support this person and this missionary or that. That's the reason that we have it. It's a tool to be used, not the object to be grasped. So that's the third thing. So pray about it, track your spending, set that perspective that this is God's money and it's a tool to be used. And then fourth, set your priorities. Now sit down and set your priorities. What is really important? And write it out. Set your priorities. Okay? Really important to me is, I want to have a home for my family, so I'm going to put that near the top. I want to feed my family. Food's going to be up there, right? But also, I want to make sure the gospel is getting out to people. So I'm going to put ministry up there, right? I mean, in the Old Testament, what was it that God told the people to do? He didn't say, go out, make your money, spend it all, and then give me whatever you have left. They gave the first 10% right off the top. That was the priority. That was the first that went out. And that set God as their priority. That's why he had them do that. It wasn't because he was afraid he wasn't going to get enough money. It's because he wanted them to remember this money came from him. He was blessing them, and that they need to keep in mind this is the priority, is God. So set those priorities for number 4, and then number 5 is to actually create a plan and stick to it, which is always fun. But if we don't make a plan, we will just go back to what we do and assume, or maybe we'll kind of think that we're doing something different, but if we don't really make a plan, usually we don't change anything. So make a plan. I hate to use the B word, make a budget. Kind of go through, figure out, this might actually help you just from a financial standpoint anyways, but what it will do is force you to kind of think through those priorities and start setting aside what you're going to do for this. And I would encourage you, as you do this, be doing this in prayer, be doing this with the scriptures, remember that this, what the true priorities are here, that this is God's money. Okay? And then that we are to be using that. Like Christ said, use this to make as many friends as possible. Use this to bring as many folks as you can to Christ. How can you do that? How can you do that? And there's a tip that I want to give you with that, which is, that generally a good tip anyways with budgeting is to always leave a little wiggle room in there, right? Because nothing goes to plan, ever. And you're like, oh, I know exactly how this month's going to go. And then, that one unexpected thing and the whole thing's out the window. Always good to leave a little wiggle room. Do that within the ministry as well. Right? So it's not all, okay, this is what I'm going to give to church, and this is what I'm going to give to this campus ministry, this is, whatever, and that's it. I've got my line item. Give yourself a little extra there for those things that will happen during the month that will allow you to minister to someone personally. When you find someone who needs some help and you're saying, you know what, I actually can help you. And a lot of times we get so tight with everything that we see someone in need and we're like, I really wish I could help you, but I don't have anything. But if we set aside that, we say, you know what, I have it. Here you go. I'm happy to help you. And it what it does is it changes the character of who we are. And we start to be able to have that generous, joyful, giving spirit that God says we should have. And we've created the margin to be able to do that. Because ultimately, what we're working with here is the response that we have to what God has given us.